Sunday sound off, our first hot topic of the night. Will anyone in the Big 12 challenge Kansas next season as they go for their 14th straight Big 12 championship? Jarrett.
Yeah, I'm going to say the Oklahoma Sooners. When you look at Kansas, they have Devontae Graham coming back. They have Svi Mykhailiuk coming back. They also get Azubuike back from injury. I think Devontae Graham at the point guard position, it'll be interesting to see how he takes over for Frank Mason. When I look at Oklahoma, Lon Kruger got Trae Young, great point guard that'll be an impact next year for the Sooners. And then they got Cameron McGusty, Christian Doolittle, and another player that I really like is Rashard Odoms. Those three guys are young core nucleus. They got length, they got size, they got a lot of pieces where they could compete against Kansas, and point guard play is so important in this league. I think Trae Young's going to be very good, and I like the Sooners to compete against Kansas.
Blair.
Well, and I'll add Malik Newman to the roster for Kansas next year, the transfer from Mississippi State, who will step in right away, could end up being their leading scorer next season. Two other teams to add to Jarrett's list, or to his Oklahoma pick, is West Virginia. They lose two guys, Tariq Phillip and Nathan, the tall kid.
Adrian.
Yeah. So everybody's back, including Javon Carter for West Virginia. And how about the last team standing in the Big 12 right now, TCU, the team that beat Kansas in the Big 12 tournament. They're in the semifinals of the NIT. Jamie Dixon did such a great job with TCU this year. I think TCU makes a jump to the upper division. So Oklahoma, West Virginia, and TCU would be in my top four.
Soren?
Yeah, Blair stole my thunder there with TCU. I think they're a team that's on the rise as well, and going to be someone to reckon with in the league. But, you know, from the standpoint of the Jayhawks, I think it is a chance. You know, we're given some contenders, but I'm going to say that they're as vulnerable as they've ever been. Look, transfers can be great. Transfers can be huge disappointments. Malik Newman was a huge recruit, but we don't know what he's going to be with the Jayhawks. We know he didn't end up being everything they wanted him to be at Mississippi State. And I'm not convinced that Svi Mykhailiuk's going to be back. I've heard a lot of rumblings that he's going to go off to get a check and go back and play at Europe. I will be stunned if Carlton Bragg is back, and I know he hasn't played well, and that might make a lot of Kansas fans happy. But when you start thinking about the depth and guys that have played, I don't think he's going to be there. And look, when guys' names get mentioned in bad situations, which we know there's been a number of those cases in Lawrence, they tend to not show up. I think LeGerald Vick could be a candidate for the Brandon Green, I'm applying for the NBA even though I'm not ready treatment. Yeah, so I think you know, it's going to be a really interesting summer to see who is back for Kansas. And then if those scholarships open up, they can grab a top recruit as well, and that'll maybe make this thing look a little bit different. They'll be the favorite because people hang their hat on Kansas, but I'm not sold that it's just in the bag for 14.
All right, here's our second hot topic. This is sort of tongue-in-cheek, but considering the success of former K-State coaches in the NCAA tournament this season, should Bruce Weber just leave Manhattan and find a job where he'd have a better chance to get there?
Absolutely, he should. Right. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Just walk right out of town, and no. But it's interesting in that the way that the regional final games unfolded, we now have two former Kansas State head coaches, Frank Martin from South Carolina and Dana Altman from Oregon, now in the Final Four, joining. I think we came up with a list of 5 coaches of the last 7 at Kansas State who have been to a Final Four at a school other than Kansas State, including the current coach, Bruce Weber, went with Illinois back in '05. But Lon Kruger, just as recently as last season with the Sooners, and then, of course, Bob Huggins was the K-State coach in '07, took 2 programs, Cincinnati and West Virginia, to the Final Four. So I know that's a level of frustration for K-State fans, but you can take heart in the fact that the Final Four also has a former KU coach, Roy Williams.
That's right. Soren.
Well, it's funny, you know, I was on a show on Mad Dog Radio earlier tonight, which is based out of New York City, and they were asking this same question. So K-State's history of coaches moving on and doing better is even getting some run on the national scale. And I think a lot of that's because of the personality of Frank Martin. There's no doubt that that was a disaster to let Frank Martin go. But I think there's one thing you have to do when you see all these coaches that have won elsewhere, but they're not having the same kind of success at Kansas State, is you got to look in the mirror and say, maybe that's not the kind of program we are. And K-State certainly their athletic director, John Curry, didn't. He's not there anymore. But when you get a coach like Frank Martin, you need to appreciate him. And you need to give them what they need to win: money, facilities, coaching staff, salaries for their assistant coaches, and keep them there. We joke about it because it's kind of a funny ha-ha, but part of it is that they haven't been able to read really coaches well enough. Dana Altman, was a very different coach back then, and he's been through a lot in his days at Creighton, taking the Arkansas job and coming back, and then teaming up with Team Nike at Oregon. That makes it a lot easier to recruit. But the Frank Martin one is bad, and yeah, if you got the right coach, you don't want to let him go and make that mistake like they've clearly done a couple of times.
Jarrett?
Yeah, I look at Bruce Weber and the situation, and I look at it as an opportunity for him. Right now, his back's against the wall. I know he was on the hot seat this year. They made the NCAA tournament. They won the play-in game. He's going to lose Wesley Iwundu, DJ Johnson. Those are two very good players. But he's got a young core nucleus, and I think as coaches, they have that competitive spirit that he's going to want to prove himself. And right now, I think when coaches are faced with that adversity, they got to find a way to adapt. And that's what Bruce Weber has got to start doing, is closing games out. Late game execution is so important, and that's what Kansas State struggled with. They were a roller coaster all year. They struggled with leadership. That's something that's got to be addressed. It gets addressed in the offseason. That's when leaders really emerge. That's what Bruce Weber has to challenge his team. This is a great opportunity for him. It's 1 year to get K-State Nation back in his corner. He can do that. He's got talent there. He's recruited well, but he's got to put the pieces together. And I think this is a big offseason for Bruce Weber and the Kansas State Wildcats.
All right, and our final hot topic of the evening, one of our favorite hot topics, of course, will Mizzou make the 2018 NCAA tournament? Seren.
Well, I listen a lot to Jared Sutton when it comes to the NBA draft, and Ben Simmons was the #1 overall pick in last year's NBA draft. He went to LSU. He was a one and done. They didn't make the NCAA tournament. Jared tells me, and I agree, and a lot of other people agree with him, that Markelle Fultz at Washington is going to be the #1 overall pick this year. His team won 9 games and didn't make the NCAA tournament. Now they get a kid who is in Porter Jr., the #1 player according to a number of people out there. So what does history tell us? Well, the last 2 #1 overall kids are 0 for 2 in the NCAA tournament. And as much as I love their fan base and they deserve so much better, reality is it's not going to work out. I don't know how. I don't know why.
Come on, Seren.
But no, they won't be in the tournament.
Jared, it's your alma mater. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I agree with Seren.
He agrees with Seren.
Although I will say, history does show that Missouri has had tough times. Obviously, with DGB, that's the first thing that comes to mind on the football side.
Oh, yeah.
But when you talk about Michael Porter Jr., yes, he's a terrific talent. But this is a program that hasn't won a road game in quite some time. So when we're sitting here talking about the NCAA tournament,
it's baby steps.
Yeah, right, baby steps. But right now, when you look at Michael Porter Jr., terrific talent, but there's still going to have to be at least 2 more elite players that they're going to have to bring in, and they're going to be young. And Michael Porter Jr. is going to go through growing pains. He's a freshman. He's extremely talented, but this is a different type of one-and-done player. He didn't go to Duke. He didn't go to Kansas. He didn't go to Kentucky. He didn't go to Blue Blood schools because he didn't want to do that. Now, yes, his dad was very important in this decision, but I think the biggest piece with this Mizzou basketball program is I think Cuonzo Martin is going to bring in talent, but the talent right now that's on the roster, it's role players, and it's guys like Jordan Barnett, and it's guys like Terrence Phillips and Kevin Purrier. Those 3 guys have got to take growth. They have got to develop. I think that's a big, important piece of this for Cuonzo Martin is, yes, recruiting talent, bringing them to Columbia, but also developing the talent that is already in your locker room. That is crucial for a coach that takes over a program like Missouri. But yes, let's go win a road game before we talk about the NCAA tournament.
Blair, where are you on this?
Oh, I can't say it better than that. And I think Jared makes a great point about developing the talent that's already there. Look, I don't think will Mizzou make the tournament next year is the question. Just how excited are Missouri fans for the news that's unfolded here in the last week and a half? And from what I can gather, they're very excited about it. Tickets will be sold. There'll be people in those seats that always looks embarrassingly empty when the Tigers are on television. There's a buzz. I think Missouri made the biggest news of any program that's not in the NCAA tournament over the last week and a half or so, with the hiring of Cuonzo Martin and now the developments with the Porter. So look, let's look forward to what should be a more promising Missouri basketball season and take it one step at a time. Let's see Missouri get a few victories and certainly try to get a road win in the SEC.
As Seren always says on his radio show, let's pump the brakes just a little bit. Up next, we're going to get some final thoughts from the panel. It's their time to sound off on anything that's on their minds. You're watching Sunday Sound Off.